because she hurts. And the family's very patient with her. They could have sent her away a long time ago. Okay, go rot and watch TV, watch reruns of Bob Barker, and I'll see you at the funeral. But this isn't what they did. Instead, they're saying, well, she was patient with me when I needed my diapers changed, and when I screamed and cried, even though I didn't know what I was doing, and when I seemed out of my mind, so I'm going to do the same thing. Okay? So caring for our parents is a very important thing. And caring for them not only in their life, but also in their death. We should try to, if we survive our parents, if we're that fortunate, then we should actually arrange and attend their funerals. That's also a duty that we can do as children. Arrange and attend the funeral. And we arrange the funeral in a dignified way. Sometimes people who like to deny death, if you ever, I go to lots of funerals, that's kind of my job. I see baptisms too, and everything in between. But I see a lot of funerals, and sometimes you'll see on a funeral flyer, it'll be the celebration of the life of Betty Smith, and they show Betty when she was 30, when she just had curly hair and a big smile, and you're like, well, okay, but between 30 and 90, there's some change going on. So I think a dignified funeral also respects the fact that death is a sad thing. And this is why I think it's a good thing to wear black at a funeral. Sometimes I see people and it looks like they have to go on a hot date afterwards. You're like, okay, well, interesting. Wearing bright pink or something. You're like, well, no, a funeral's a sad thing. And so it's a reasonable thing to show sadness at the death of the one who gave us life. Right? To show sadness at the death of the one who gave us life. So we try to attend and arrange for their funeral. And as Catholics, we believe that we still have a connection between people after they die. That even though their bodies have left us, their soul remains. And so we can pray for their souls. There was a man from our parish. He grew up in a state a long ways away from here. I forget which state it was, but hundreds of miles. And his parents died when he was young. He was maybe a teenager or whatnot, so he didn't get to see his parents, into his maturity. Well, they died in that city where he grew up, and they were buried there. As a teenager then, he was brought into his uncle's house or something, raised by him. Well, now he's a mature adult man. He wants to bring his parents closer to where he settled, which is Cincinnati. So he actually had his parents dug up out of their graves, you can do this, and carted all the way to Cincinnati and reburied. And the reason why is because he said, I want my children and my grandchildren to visit my parents. And so now they try to have this family tradition where on the day of the death of the parents, they go out there, they bring some flowers, they say a couple of prayers, and the whole family goes out to eat. You see, so he's respecting them. He's praying for their souls. He's remembering them appropriately. So that's all the kind of duties that children have toward their parents. And so then this leads us to, well, what are the duties of parents toward children? Because it's not something that, you guys get like a free ride and the children kind of have to, be under the whip. Okay, so the duties of parents toward their children. With this respect, the first is to respect their children. You have to respect them. As I said, children are persons, not property. I brought you into this world, I can take you out of this world. I know that, my mother used to say that. But then I got bigger and her tune changed. But just to recognize, children have feelings, and children have their own weaknesses, and they're trying. And so parents need to recognize that. And so we'd say that the first fundamental duty of a parent is to provide a home for their children. Somewhere for the child to live, but somewhere for the child to grow. I like to think of the house like a greenhouse. Inside that little greenhouse, we're trying to protect it from the scary world outside. And inside that greenhouse, we provide it with all the nutrients so it can live and grow. And what does the good gardener do? Well, he sings to his little plants. So this is what parents should do too. They provide food and shelter, but they also provide love. Children should love their parents, and sometimes, unfortunately, some parents don't love their children. Sometimes parents don't manifest that love, in different ways. So sometimes there's yelling, there's child abuse, or sometimes there's simply child neglect. Well, they're my property and I don't want it. Just like you might neglect, a cassette player. Well, it's outdated. I'm not interested anymore. This is an interesting experiment that no longer is part of my life. So we would say then that any parent that does that is they're not performing their duty, okay, to love their child. So the love then is going to be to provide a home for them, to provide a relationship with their child. Isn't it interesting that, again, that biological relationship should lead to a moral relationship? Okay? And as I said, that moral relationship is also going to involve not being overly harsh. In fact, St. Paul specifically says, fathers, do not exasperate your sons. And I used to show my dad that. There's only maybe one or two times in my life where I was actually physically afraid of my father. He was a good man. But there was one time where I was just mouthing off, and he's like cutting carrots or something. And I'm like, no, and my teenage mouth is going off. And then he turned around with his knife, and I could see there was anger in his eyes. And I was like, I better get out of here. That's really the only, it's like, wow, I could see for a second, there's that caged tiger. So parents should avoid being overly harsh. And as I said, that would mean yelling. One of the things that happens to parents is that they discover they are much less self-controlled than they thought they were. Didn't you discover that? You have children, you're like, wow, I used to think that I had it control, I was a patient person, pretty reasonable, and now there's this little monster who won't listen. And you're like, whoa, what happened? What happened to you? Well, a child happened to you. And what this means is that a child is the opportunity for sanctity. A child is an opportunity for sanctity. I once visited a woman in the hospital, and I go there and I always say, well, what would you like to pray for? And the thing that sick people typically want to pray for is themselves. We're very selfish when we're sick. Secondly, people want to pray for their family. And this woman said, though, she says, I don't want to pray for patience. She says, whenever I pray for patience, God sends me something that exasperates me. I'm like, okay, we should pray for patience. Because clearly, you haven't gotten that virtue yet, and God keeps knocking at the door. You're not answering. Okay, so parents should do that. And parents should also provide protection from harmful and degrading influences. A parent who is not careful to try to preserve the innocence of their children, preserve them from looking at things they shouldn't look at, from hanging out with people who are negative influences on them, a parent's neglecting their role. They haven't protected them properly. Well, I protect them from getting disease. I make sure my little sunshine doesn't, hang out with all those snotty-nosed kids, but they can hang out with the evil, wicked kids, no problem, as long as they wash their hands. It doesn't make any sense. Why should we protect them biologically if we're not protecting them morally? Parents should also provide a good example. And easier said than done. Because once children come around, we start to realize maybe where our parents went wrong, or maybe where our parents, they were trying, and we realized, oh, this is why they did what they did. It's difficult. And so then trying to be that good example. And if they mess up, to apologize but not abjectly. Sometimes parents think that it's their role to be the friend of their children. And I think it's just worth kind of talking about that. What does that mean for a second? The essence of friendship is equality. Okay, we have something in common. So, we're all Catholic, or you're going to be, okay, we could have that in common. We have the Catholic Club. Or, let's say that we both enjoy, motorcycle jumping. Okay, and we can talk about that injury, and this is why my shoulder kind of shakes, and we have something in common. We can go online motorcycle jumping club, and we have something in common. What happens when parents try to be friends without being parents of their children is that they're raising that child to the level of equality, as if they're pretty much on the same level. And so you see mothers dressing like their daughters, and you start to see children laughing or making fun of their parents like they would laugh or make fun of their peers. And suddenly you realize, wow, this relationship is disordered. On the one hand, parents should be friendly to their children. They should try to enjoy the company of their children, to play with them, and to share those meaningful experiences. But that's not quite the same thing as being a peer. Parents also have the obligation to educate their children. Educate their children to have goals. Sometimes this is kind of a tough thing, to try to help your child to actually have a goal in life. I know some people have the philosophy that, we have to let them discover themselves. Well, unfortunately, very often a child doesn't know what it means to discover himself, and so they let other people influence them. Instead of having the parents say, okay, well, what would you like to do? Well, let's really stick with that. I know some children who, from when they were young, they learned how to play, say, the piano or the violin. Now they're very, very good. They're in their 20s. They're great. I know other children who have owned 8 different instruments, and they can't play any of them. So the parent didn't help them to stick with the goal. So sometimes it's the parent being that consistent rule of order. I know other parents, the parents themselves can't play any instruments, but because they wanted to give that gift to their children, they tried to cultivate that interest in music in their children. And now their children really like it, and they're really happy. Some of them play in the youth orchestra, and the dad and the mom, well, we don't play, but we try to encourage our children. We're not forcing them to do it. We're not, trying to make them, we don't shame them and make them cry if they mess up on a note or anything like that. But we do encourage them, even in a skill or a gift that we didn't have. They shape their character. Parents also should teach a child self-discipline. Okay? There are certain animals that will keep eating no matter how much food is there. They're called dogs. Lots of animals are like that. But sometimes children are like that too, right? Like if I keep giving my little piggy corn puffs, and then he loves the corn puffs. Well, I can't say no. Look how much he likes it. And whenever I say no, then he starts to cry. Well, sometimes you have to let baby cry. Because you have to teach them self-discipline. And self-discipline at first isn't very pleasant. So it's good, once they order their lives like that, now they are learning that role where they can say no to themselves. Parents should also punish their children for wrongdoing. And of course there's reasonable punishment and unreasonable punishment. There's where punishment becomes abuse. But there's actually, reasonable punishment, and sometimes corporal punishment is even called for. The older a child gets, the less corporal punishment is appropriate. And the reason why corporal punishment works for little children is because they can't reason with you. If baby's going to go over and he loves to get his fork and put it into the outlet, the electrical outlet, no, baby, see, there's this magical electrical current, and baby doesn't understand what you're talking about. He's not going to get to physics till age 3. Right now, he just wants to put the little shiny thing in the shiny thing, and what's going to happen? So, or maybe a doctor told me that one of the reasons why children get sick so often is because they put everything into their mouths, their feet. So sometimes what you have to do is you have to give them physical encouragement not to do that. Somebody once said that what some children need is a pat in the back, provided it's low enough and hard enough. So sometimes we have to do that. But the older they get, well, then the more we have to correspond to what they are able to receive. So they're older, now you can reason with them. And then when they're adults, they're outside of your house, you really can't punish them. Now, if well, just one thing to think about in terms of their inheritance is with parents, they actually, sometimes parents will get revenge on their children. In fact, just today, I read about a guy who left $250,000 to his cats and not to his children. That is a disordered relationship. Like, whatever those children did to the dad, or whatever he did to them, there's clearly disorder in that family. And the cats don't even understand. So maybe it was about the cats. I don't know. Maybe they did something to the cats. But the point is that parents, in punishing, it's always for the purpose of trying to help your children to become the people that they need to be. Parents should provide schooling, whether at home or abroad. And parents should also help their child to prepare for a good job. Sometimes parents don't do that. And then the kids don't really know what to do in their life, and then they don't find their way for a long time. They find it difficult to know even how to get a job, how to apply for a job, how to apply for college. Parents should be helping the children out with that. Not everybody needs to go to college, of course, but everybody does need a job to survive, unless you're a trust fund child, and then parents should teach you how to use your money wisely. Okay, with regard to the supernatural things, parents have the obligation to teach their children the faith. They teach it by words, by explaining things. I can think of times that I've been in Mass, and I see the mother with the baby, or a little kid, and I can see the mom pointing things out. There's this, and there's this, and she's explaining things. You see, this is one of the reasons why we have lots of visual things at Mass. So even the little kid can look at something. And that's a great thing. And then also, of course, to pray with your child is an important duty too. Did you know that parents can actually bless their children? So I can bless water, I can bless salt and that sort of thing. A parent can bless a child because you have a unique relationship with them. You have a relationship with your child that I don't have. I can be a spiritual father, but you can be a biological mother or father. And so what this means is that biological relationship can lead to a spiritual relationship. And the book of Sirach actually talks about the father blessing the child. We can say that the mother can do that too. So the prayers of a parent for their child are very, very powerful. And reciprocally, there have been instances, I've read about instances of exorcists who discovered that a parent cursed a child. And that can be very powerful too. There's one exorcist, the chief exorcist of Rome. His name is Gabriel Amorth. He wrote this book, The Exorcist Tells the Story. And he describes how there was a young man who was always, he's tripping on things, and then he started to break his legs, and he broke his toe, and nobody could figure out, his legs were always he's always getting all sorts of mischief with his legs, they were always getting messed up. Well, when he was a little kid, he was running around his grandma's house, and he knocked over her favorite knick-knack, and she cursed his legs. She said, "I hope your legs never work." She cursed his legs. And so the priest had to undo that curse. So the prayers or the blessing of a parent for their child can be very powerful, but reciprocally, the curse of a parent, or whatever harms they produce on the child, can also be very powerful. Okay. So we've talked about the context and the family and children and parents, and now we're down to authorities. The reason why we include the authorities under the fourth commandment, honor your father and mother, is because basically authorities have a parental type role, but not exactly. So the Roman word for your country land was patria. Your country was your patria. Do you know what your father was? Your pater. Okay? So it's the same It's the same root. They're not exactly the same thing, but it's your fatherland. It's the land of my fathers. And so what this means is that we also have a relationship with those who are in authority over us in the state. And it's always been the understanding of Christians to pray for those and to respect those who have legitimate political authority over us, even if some of the decisions they make are wrong. We can't say, well, this person who, is now in charge, who's not of my political party, well, I'm not going to pay taxes because I don't like it. Well, no. Our obligation as citizens goes beyond the temporal, particularities, and something that persists because I'm a citizen of this society. And similarly, we can say that it's the duty of the citizen to be a patriot, okay? It's actually the same root. You see that? Is that interesting? It's that patra. And then you know the word padre. Hey, padre. It's the same root. Pat. The T turned into a D in Spanish. Okay, so patriot is somebody who loves his country, somebody who respects his country, somebody who takes part in the vote, who defends his country if necessary. What's the difference between patriotism and nationalism? Nationalism is supposing that your country is the best one, which may not be the case. In our case, it's true. But if you're anywhere else, it's not going to be the case. So, but a nationalist, as I said, a nationalist is somebody who supports their country no matter what. My country, right or wrong. It's like saying my mother, drunk or sober. No, but patriotism is loving your country and trying to work for the best of your country. And so then we should have that filial relationship also. Finally, we have there are duties of authorities, and I think we're going to get into that in a different class. But we can say at the very least, the duties of authorities are going to be to respect God's law, to respect nature, natural law, the law that God founded, which means that it must also respect the rights of the church to allow us to worship, to respect the fundamental rights of human beings. Associated with respect for authorities, or patria, or country, pater, or parents, being patriots, is also having respect for our ecclesiastical authorities. Of course, some priests and bishops, well, they're not all they should be. They're not exactly like Christ, the priest, or are the apostles. But they still, because of their position in the church, they deserve a certain respect. It's a respect that's not servile, but saying that we can see Jesus working through them. This is also why we respect religious, such as nuns. Right? They have a special role in the church, imaging for us that life of Christ in a special way. So if we keep the fourth commandment, then, as I said, there's going to be reward, that you may live long in the land, and it may go well with you. In fact, to keep the fourth commandment implies eternal life. In Scripture, there's a verse that I wanted to quote, and it's beautiful. It says, "Whoever honors his father atones for his sins." Wow. "Whoever glorifies his mother is like one who lays up treasure. Whoever honors his father will be gladdened by his own children. When he prays, he will be heard." That's a great thing.
What is that?
It's the book of Sirach, chapter 3, verse 2 to 6. So this is, it's a beautiful promise for us. And just as there's always a promise of reward, there's also the promise of punishment. The one who does not honor his father or mother, it says, will surely die. And it says, his lamp will be snuffed out. Ravens will pluck out his eye, and the eagles will eat it. think it means in a spiritual sense. So it's a beautiful thing then to think about as we come for this Thanksgiving and we see family and friends, to think about where we are, to be grateful for what they've done for us, to pray for them, to try to be that good example. And so that way we can try to inculcate this respect and love for human society that begins at home. Thank you. So are there any questions or comments? No? Yeah.
For just 4 things that I'm hearing,
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably like send out, I don't know, Padre, picture of,
Okay, this is our country, our patria, our fatherland. Pater is our biological father. Patriot is one who loves his country, lover of country. And then Padre is our spiritual father, the priest. Okay, all right. I think we'd go for a break. All done.
I don't know how to do it.
Nope. How do you stop it?